This is the last lecture, and in the previous lecture we have discussed two epistemological positions of the two sub-schools of Charvakas. One can be called cognitive skepticism, which is attributed to Jayarashi Bhatta, and extreme empiricism, which is the popular version of Charvaka epistemology. According to the extreme empiricist position, Charvakas accepted only perception as the authentic means to knowledge, that is pramana, and rejected this status to inference. This is the popular view about Charvaka Darshana. But this view is not accepted by some modern scholars such as Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay and Ramakrishna Bhattacharya. These scholars reject the popular view and maintain that Charvakas did not question the authenticity of all inferences, that they accepted inferences of empirically verifiable type and rejected those of other type. Against this, I have held that Charvaka Lokayata need not be regarded as a unitary school of philosophy. It should be better understood as a family of schools which had rejection of otherworldly metaphysics as their common minimum program. Hence, skeptical position of Jayarashi as well as extreme empiricist view, which is popularly attributed to Charvakas, can be regarded as genuine Charvaka positions. At the same time, what the modern scholars such as Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay and Ramakrishna Bhattacharya regard as the genuine position of Charvakas can be acknowledged as one of the positions, even as a sophisticated position of some Charvakas, though not as the only genuine Charvaka position. This sophisticated position can be called mitigated empiricism, according to which perception as well as a certain kind of inference are accepted as pramana. Now, continuity between extreme and mitigated empiricism. Of course, it is not necessary to assume that the two views, extreme empiricist view that only perception is pramana and the mitigated empiricist view that a kind of inference is also pramana, are absolutely inconsistent with each other. The apparent inconsistency between the two can be resolved on the following lines. 1. Mitigated empiricist Charvakas are still empiricists in the sense that though they accept inference along with perception, inference that they regard as acceptable is supposed to be verifiable through perception or necessary for the explanation of what one knows by perception. So ultimately, perception is supposed to be the major pramana which governs the acceptability of inference. 2. Though mitigated empiricist Charvakas accept a kind of inference as pramana, this does not mean that they are denying the weaknesses of inference as pramana. They are not withdrawing the criticism of inference, particularly that regarding the possibility of knowing universal concomitance with certainty. At the same time, they are accepting inference as a useful means to knowledge. We have already distinguished in the last lecture between strong and weak sense of the word pramana. Just to repeat, according to the strong sense of the word, pramana means the authoritative means to knowledge or an authority. According to the weak sense, pramana means a useful means but not necessarily an authoritative means to knowledge. Hence, we can say that when Charvakas claim that Anumana is not pramana, they are using the word pramana in its strong sense, whereas when the mitigated empiricist Charvakas accept a kind of inference as pramana, they use the word pramana in the weak sense, not in the strong sense. This should not be taken to mean that the difference between the extreme empiricist Charvakas and mitigated empiricist Charvakas is only verbal or terminological. That is, that the extreme empiricists use the word pramana in strong sense, whereas the mitigated empiricists use it in weak sense. The difference between them is subtler than that. The extreme empiricist Charvakas are not interested in distinguishing between types of inferences as acceptable inferences and non-acceptable inferences. Their criticism of inferences is pervasive and not discriminative.
मराठीत बोलू शकत
नाही. मी
कुठले नाव आहे ना तुमचं?
हे पहा, इंग्रजीत चालणार आहे.
तुम्ही
समाज बनू नका.
याच्यापूर्वी आलात का?
हो, आले ते तेव्हा मराठीत झालं होतं म्हणून विचारलं.
मराठीत नव्हतं झालं.
तुमचं नाही, आधीच झालं होतं, परवाचं ते मराठीत झालं होतं.
आणि ही लेक्चर सिरीज जी आहे ती इंग्रजीमध्येच आहे.
मला मंजुळांचं झालं.
हां, वालं मंजुळांचं, माझं नाही. माझं आधीच ऐकलं होतं का तुम्ही, असं विचारतोय मी. कारण हे त्या सिरीजमधलं शेवटचं लेक्चर आहे. हां, आतापर्यंत 6 लेक्चर झाली आहेत आणि ती याच पद्धतीने झाली आहेत.
मराठी सांगा.
हे 7वं आणि शेवटचं आहे.
चाललंय, आता बोलू नका ना.
चर्चेच्या वेळेला मराठीतून बोलायला पूर्ण वाव आहे. On the other hand, when mitigated empiricist Charvakas would grant inferences as pramana in weak sense, they do not grant all inferences in that sense. They would make a distinction between acceptable inferences and non-acceptable inferences even in the weak sense. Hence, whereas extreme empiricist Charvakas make two-tier division of the means to knowledge, authentic and inauthentic, the mitigated empiricist Charvakas would make a 3-tier division as follows. 1. They accept certain cognitions or the means thereof as pramana in the strong sense of the term. For example, they accept perception in that way. 2. They accept cognitions of a certain type as pramana in the weak sense as probably true cognitions or useful means to cognition, though not as an authority. For example, they accept certain types of inference in that way. 3. They do not accept certain types of cognition as pramana even in the weak sense. For example, they do not accept inference for the existence of God as pramana in that sense, even in that sense. So the classification of inferences these Charvakas are making is the one between those which are acceptable as pramana in some sense and inferences which are not acceptable as pramana at all. Now the next question is, how exactly do the mitigated empiricist Charvakas discriminate between the two kinds of inference, acceptable ones and non-acceptable ones? Now, there are two proposals. Broadly speaking, here the mitigated empiricist Charvakas have in mind the distinction between scientific inferences and metaphysical inferences or speculative inferences. We find that in the Indian polemical literature, two proposals have been made from the side of Charvakas. One, Jayanta Bhatta, 9th century AD, in his Nyaya Manjari, refers to the view that inference is of two kinds, which I translate as empirical and non-empirical. The exact terminology is Utpanna Pratiti and Utpadya Pratiti. The inference of fire from smoke belongs to the former kind. The inference of transcendent entities like God belongs to the latter. Hence, the former kind of inference is acceptable as pramana, but the latter is not. Jayanta attributes this view to whom he calls more learned Charvakas, Sushikshita-tara Charvakas. 2. That is the second proposal. Kamalashila, 8th century AD, in his commentarial work Tattva Sangraha Panjika, quotes Purandara's statement. Charvakas do admit commonsensical inferences, but the inference which is made by transcending the worldly way is denied by them. लोक प्रसिद्धम अनुमानम चार्वाकैः अपि इष्यते एव यत्तु लौकिकं मार्गम उल्लंघ्य अनुमानम इष्यते तन निषिध्यते. The first proposal gives us a positivist approach to acceptability of inference, and the second proposal gives us a common sense oriented approach to acceptability of inference. Let us consider the two proposals in some details. First proposal, positivist approach to acceptability of inference. As I have said, the more learned Charvakas, as referred to by Jayanta, accept empirical inferences but deny non-empirical ones. Empirical inference and non-empirical inference are rather simplified translations of the complex terms used by Jayanta, namely Utpanna Pratiti Anumana and Utpadya Pratiti Anumana. Literally, Utpanna Pratiti means that which is experienced in the past, and Utpadya Pratiti means that which is yet to be experienced. Apparently, the two terms are used as the adjectives of inference, but they should not be taken literally in that sense. That is because an inference itself cannot be characterized as experienced in past or yet to be experienced. Charvakas are here referring to the two situations, one in which the object of inference is already known through experience, and the other where the object of inference is yet to be experienced. Hence, the terms Utpanna Pratiti and Utpadya Pratiti should be taken to characterize the object of inference, that is, the target property of the inference, and not inference itself. For the sake of simplicity and brevity, I am translating Utpanna Pratiti Anumana as empirical inference and Utpadya Pratiti Anumana as non-empirical inference. Of course, when we say that the object of inference, that is the target property, sadhya, in the sense of empirical inference is already experienced, and in the case of non-empirical inference it is not already experienced, we are not saying, to use type token distinction, that exactly the same object in token sense is experienced in one case and not experienced in another. That is, exactly the same fire which I am inferring is already experienced. This is not meant by saying that the inference of fire from smoke is Utpanna Pratiti. Even in the example of inference of fire from smoke, which is a kind of empirical inference, we have not already experienced the specific fire item that we are inferring, but we have experienced some fire item, for example, the fire in the kitchen. In a non-empirical inference, on the other hand, the object of inference is not experienced before, even in type sense. For example, in the inference of the existence of God, we have neither experienced before the God that we are inferring, nor have we experienced some other God or God in general. Hence, when the object of inference, that is an object of that kind, is already the object of one's experience, the inference is called empirical. And when an object of inference, that is an object of that kind, is not the object of one's experience at all, the inference is called non-empirical or Utpadya Pratiti. In other words, we can say that the first type of inference can be called empirical inference because its object is experience type, that is an empirical object. As against this, the second type of inference can be called non-empirical because its object is not experience type and hence is a non-empirical object. The distinction will be roughly between the inference, the conclusion of which is verifiable, and that the conclusion of which is not verifiable. The term Utpadya Pratiti literally means that the experience of which is to be generated. Here Utpadya, to be generated, as the adjective of Pratiti, experience, can simply mean that it is to be generated through the inferential cognition itself or through some other alleged means of cognition such as verbal testimony. But it does not mean that we will know it through senses. In the argument for the existence of God, for instance, God, which is the object of inference, is not something we have already experienced or what we are likely to experience, but the experience of God in the form of its inferential judgment is something we are going to generate, as it were, through the inference itself or through some other means such as verbal testimony. But it does not mean that we will experience God in future by perception. Here I want to point out that the Charvaka classification of inference just discussed need not be taken in isolation as a classification peculiar to Charvakas. In fact, the classification was explicitly or implicitly made by many other systems. For example, it is parallel to the Vaisheshika classification of inference into Drushta and Samanyato Drushta Anumana, that is, seen in particular and seen in general. Similarly, the threefold classification of inference presented by Nayayikas and Sankhyas as Purvavat, Sheshavat and Samanyato Drushta. Purvavat, like the previous, Sheshavat, like the residual, and Samanyato Drushta, seen in general, can be interpreted as an expansion of the twofold Vaisheshika classification and hence can be compared with the Charvaka classification. This shows that the distinction between the two kinds of inferences was so fundamental that many systems were aware of it in one way or the other. In a way, this was the distinction, to put it simplistically, between scientific inference and metaphysical inference. The results of scientific inferences were verifiable. The results of metaphysical inference were not verifiable. Though different schools were aware of this distinction, for the non-Charvaka schools of philosophy, both the types of inferences were acceptable. In fact, the non-empirical inferences were more important for some of them because non-empirical inferences were the tools of establishing their transcendent metaphysical doctrines. Charvakas differed from other schools exactly on this point. Charvakas held that since empirical inferences are verifiable through perception, they have greater justifiability. Non-empirical inferences, on the other hand, are not verifiable and hence they are weaker in terms of justifiability. Hence, the classifications of inferences that Vaisheshikas, Nayayikas and Sankhyas were presenting were classifications of acceptable inferences according to them, but the classification that Charvakas were presenting, though formally similar to these classifications, was meant to be one between acceptable and non-acceptable inference. Now, some examples of non-empirical inferences which were not acceptable to Charvakas. Here it may be interesting to consider some of the non-empirical inferences which were actually presented by the other schools of philosophy. One is the argument for the existence of God. Nayayikas presented a non-empirical inference for establishing the existence of God. The argument runs, trees, mountains, etc. must be having a creator because they are products like a pot. The argument says that just as pot has a creator, namely a potter, similarly the world consisting of trees and mountains also must have a creator. This is an analogical inference which takes a leap from an empirically verifiable creator, a potter, to an empirically non-verifiable alleged creator, namely God. Non-empirical inferences often take such a leap from empirical to non-empirical, which is not permissible according to the positivist empiricist Charvakas. The other such Utpadya Pratiti Anumana or empirically non-verifiable inference is argument for the existence of a soul, that is Purusha, the argument which Sankhyas advocate. The Sankhya argument for the existence of soul, Purusha, involves a similar leap. Sankhya school accepts matter, Prakriti, and souls, Purushas, as the two basic components of the universe. Whatever we see in the universe is a manifestation of that matter. Souls are inactive spectators of the activities of the matter. The existence of souls becomes important because, according to Sankhya, whatever the matter does, it does not do it for the sake of itself, but for the sake of a soul. Sankhya school gives this itself as the ground of the existence of the soul. The argument runs, the things such as the visual sense organ are meant for something other than them. Because they are composite in nature, that is, they are sanghata in nature, all composite things are meant for something other than themselves. For example, the things like bed are not meant for themselves, but for persons who use them. The Buddhists such as Dignag and Dharmakirti found fault with this argument. They brought out the gap between the evidence and the intended conclusion. What Sankhya thinkers intend to prove is the existence of the soul, Purusha, which is non-composite, whereas the persons for whom the things such as beds and chairs are meant are essentially composite. From Charvaka point of view, the same gap between the evidence and the intended conclusion can be explained in terms of empirical and non-empirical. The persons for whom beds, chairs, etc. are meant are empirical, whereas the so-called souls for whom sense organs are supposed to be meant are non-empirical. Hence, the inference being non-verifiable is not acceptable according to Charvakas. Then the other type of example is what Nayayikas call Kevala Vyatireki Anumana, that is purely negative inference of the existence of soul, Atman. In the first talk, I referred to the Nyaya classification of inference into three kinds, as purely positive, Kevalanvayi, purely negative, Kevala Vyatireki, and positive negative, Anvaya Vyatireki. For establishing transcendent objects, Nayayikas sometimes use purely negative inferences because they are the inferences in which only negative concomitance is available. So negative, we have talked of positive and negative concomitance, Anvaya Vyapti and Vyatireka Vyapti. So inference in which only Vyatireka Vyapti is available, Anvaya Vyapti is not available, that is called Kevala Vyatireki inference. And in the case of Atman, when we want to prove Atman, there also, according to Nayayikas, only negative Vyapti is available, positive is not available. Keshava Mishra, the author of Tarkabhasha, a Nayayika cited the following purely negative inference which is supposed to establish the existence of soul. The living bodies of beings must be possessing soul because they possess the act of breathing, etc. In this inference, we have only negative concomitance of the type whatever lacks the soul does not possess the acts such as breathing. For example, pot, cloth, rock, they don't breathe and they don't have soul. We do not have positive concomitance of the type whatever breathes possesses soul, because although we have seen many breathing things before, we have not experienced soul, which is itself being argued for in this inference. Mitigated empiricist Charvakas would criticize this inference for the same reason. Now, the classification of inference into empirical and non-empirical and rejection of non-empirical inferences proved to be useful methodological tool at the hands of Charvakas in examination of the traditional beliefs in soul and life after death. We come across an interesting story in Buddhist canons of a chieftain Payasi, who was a non-believer and had confirmed his this worldly and materialist view through experiments. Payasi had a debate with the Buddhist monk Kumara Kassapa. According to the story, Payasi argues for his materialist views and Kumara Kassapa counters his arguments through analogical and speculative arguments. A similar story is found in Jain canonical literature with some variations. The materialist arguments made by Payasi in the respective dialogues largely follow the positivist approach. Payasi, according to the story, does not make speculations regarding existence or non-existence of soul, but conducts experiments to find out whether there must be the soul substance which leaves the body at the time of death. Payasi, being a chieftain, had freedom to execute death sentence to the criminals who had committed a serious crime. He uses this freedom by killing the criminals experimentally and observe what exactly happens. Once, while executing the death sentence, he managed to throw this man alive into a jar, close the mouth of it and cover it tightly. The criminal was killed by putting the jar onto a furnace and kindling a fire. When the man was dead, the mouth of the jar was unbound and opened and quickly observed with the idea perhaps we may see the soul of him coming out. Payasi did not see the soul substance leaving the body, although all other conditions were kept under control. He inferred that there is no life after death. This shows that there must have been some Charvaka thinkers who applied positivist epistemology not only at theoretical level, but applied it in practical situations. For a detailed account of the story, see Payasi Sutta as included in Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay's volume Charvaka Lokayata. In the above mentioned debate, which Payasi had with the Buddhist monk, or a similar dialogue in Jaina canons, the opponent who believed in karma, rebirth and other worlds did not provide any verifiable counter evidence, but made speculative and analogical arguments and appealed to the divine eye developed through spiritual practice. Now, this is about the first proposal, that is what we can call positivist form of mitigated empiricism. Now, what are the possible difficulties in it? In general, we can say that the positivist form of mitigated empiricism must have helped Charvakas in rejecting the speculative arguments for the entities like God and soul advanced by their believer opponents. However, positivism has its own limitations. In order to lead a happy life in this world without believing in the other worlds and such other things, and in order to explain the possibility of this worldly life, we need to believe in certain things which are not verifiable. Take for example the existence of sense organs. Though perception becomes possible because of sense organs, and hence we have to accept their existence, sense organs themselves are not perceptible. Similarly, one has to accept the phenomena like other minds, space and time, though they cannot be known by perception. According to a common understanding, though Charvakas reject otherworldly metaphysics, they are defenders of common sense and belief in space, time and other minds and sense organs is a part of common sense. Moreover, Charvakas not only deny the existence of soul or consciousness outside the body, they also try to give a materialist explanation of consciousness. They argue that consciousness arises from the four gross elements, namely earth, water, fire and air, like the intoxicating power which arises from molasses. The inference for materialism that Charvakas are giving here is non-verifiable type of inference, that is Utpadya Pratiti type of inference. The materialist thesis of the Charvakas that consciousness arises from matter cannot be verified either in one's own case or in the case of others. And the instance of intoxicating power and molasses is just a metaphor and not an instance proper, because the power of intoxication is not the same as consciousness. Such non-verifiable type of inference cannot be accepted in the positivist epistemological framework. This might have led some mitigated empiricist Charvakas to classify inference in a way more open to commonsensical and materialist reasoning. This brings us to the second classification of inference, namely commonsensical and trans-commonsensical inference, Loka Prasiddha Anumana, and what I call Lokatita Anumana. So we come to the second proposal, common sense oriented approach to acceptability of inference, that is acceptance of Loka Prasiddha Anumana. I have already referred to Kamalashila's reference to Purandara's statement that Charvakas do admit commonsensical inferences, Loka Prasiddha Anumana, but the inference which is made by transcending the worldly way of life, by transcending Laukika Marga, is denied by them. This indirectly refers to a Charvaka thinker called Purandara who upheld such a common sense oriented epistemological perspective. The original term which I have translated as commonsensical inference is Loka Prasiddha Anumana. Now, what exactly does Purandara mean by the term Loka Prasiddha Anumana? While asserting Loka Prasiddha Anumana, Purandara is also rejecting certain kinds of inferences which are contrary to it, namely the inferences which transgress the worldly way. Accordingly, I am suggesting Loka Prasiddha can mean strongly established within the framework of this worldly way of life. Here I am interpreting the term Loka as related to this worldly or secular way of life and the term Prasiddha as strongly established. In other words, Loka Prasiddha Anumana is an inference which proves something within the framework of this worldly way of life. I think that is the most plausible meaning of the word. Loka Prasiddha inference as interpreted above is wide enough to include verifiable inferences accepted by the more learned Charvakas. But in addition to verifiable inferences, it also includes a class of non-verifiable inferences under the condition that they are Loka Prasiddha. That is, they are strongly supported within the framework of this worldly way of life. They are empirically or pragmatically necessary for explaining the fact of this world, the facts of this world. Laukika Marga, which means the worldly way of life, is an important concept in this context. It is comparable with the term worldly practices, Loka Vyavahara, which the skeptic Jayarashi talks about in his work. Jayarashi says that the worldly practices are common to both ignorant and learned people. Loka Vyavaharam Prati Sadrushav Bala Panditav, that is his statement. In other words, nobody can get rid of them. But Jayarashi, being a skeptic, does not accept any principles or essences underlying these worldly practices. Hence, he says that all such practices may be appreciated without reflecting upon them. The mitigated empiricist Charvakas we are discussing now, however, consider worldly practices not at superficial level, but at a deeper level. Rootedness in worldly practices then becomes the criterion of acceptability of knowledge claims. Common sense beliefs are at the root of the worldly practices. In this sense, these mitigated empiricist Charvakas can be called common sense empiricists, and the best approximation to the concept of Loka Prasiddha Anumana is, I think, commonsensical inference or commonsensically acceptable inference. It should be noted here that common sense beliefs are not commonly accepted beliefs or popular beliefs, but they are beliefs which should be commonly accepted, because non-acceptance of them will lead to pragmatic contradiction. Lokaprasiddha inferences interpreted in this way will include inferences regarding the existence of space, time, other minds, matter, etc., which follow from our daily life by way of explanatory necessity or pragmatic necessity. For example, when I am writing, it follows that material objects like paper and pen exist. When I am communicating with others, it follows that there are other minds, other persons. Similarly, when I am writing, it follows that there are space and time. When I am writing, I am moving pen from left to right. Right and left being spatial concepts, that is space related concepts, it follows that space exists. Since writing in an act which begins at one point of time and ends at another, it follows that there is time. In the modern context, G.E. Moore's defense of common sense incorporates these forms of reasoning. So he has an article, A Defense of Common Sense, included in Theory of Knowledge, Classical and Contemporary Readings. G. Moore is also known for his refutation of idealism. I want to suggest that the mitigated empiricist Charvakas who accepted Lokaprasiddha inference and denied otherworldly metaphysics were the Indian critics of idealism and defenders of common sense of those times. Now let us try to understand the materialist argument of the Charvakas in the light of the above notion of Lokaprasiddha Anumana. The famous materialist argument of the Charvakas runs as follows. Consciousness arises from the four gross elements, like the intoxicating power which arises from molasses. Bhutebhya chaitanyam, what is that? Madashaktivat. Another version is also found. The consciousness which is seen in the modified insentient elements arises in them, like the red color arises due to the combination of betel leaf, betel nut and spice powder. Both these arguments appear as incomplete arguments. Let us grant for the time being that the first three members of the well-known Nyaya syllogism can give the model of a complete argument. The mountain has fire because it has smoke, like the kitchen, or whatever has smoke has kitchen, like whatever has smoke has fire, like the kitchen. We can compare the Charvaka arguments with it. The consciousness arises from the four material elements because ... like intoxicating power which arises in molasses, or like red color which arises in the chewed combination of betel nuts, etc. It can be clearly seen that the Charvaka argument is incomplete because it contains the statement of the thesis, that is pratigna, an instance, drishtanta, but no reason. So there I have just said because ... There is no statement of invariable concomitance also. So the important question persists, what is the reason intended by Charvakas? In order to trace the reason, one needs to elaborate the contention of the Charvakas. One thing is sure, that here the Charvakas intended to express the idea of inseparability between body and consciousness. It is not clear as to which ontological category Charvakas would apply to consciousness. Consciousness could be understood as a new quality, guna, emerging in the body, or it can be understood as function of the body, that is kriya of the body, or disposition, that is shakti of the body. In all these models, body can be called the material cause or the ground, upadana, of the consciousness. So at this stage, the Charvakas are simply arguing that since consciousness is inseparable from corporeal body and it does not it does arise within the limits of the body, it must be arising from the body itself. It must have the corporeal body as its material cause. So the reason which could be added to the above incomplete argument would be that because consciousness is found in the living body only, and the complete argument will be the consciousness arises from the four material elements which constitute the body. Because consciousness is found in the living body only, if a quality or motion or a power is found in a composite substance and not outside it, then it must be arising from the composite substance itself, like intoxicating power which arises in molasses, or like red color which arises in the chewed combination of betel leaf, etc. The opponents of the Charvakas who believe in consciousness to be independent of body will not be satisfied with this argument. One of the main problems they would pose is the heterogeneity between body and consciousness. The opponents believe that in the case of material cause, there is homogeneity between cause and effect. The effect cannot be radically different from its material cause. For example, in the threads, if the threads are yellow, the cloth which is produced from those threads also will be yellow. If the earthen halves are red, the earthen pot will also be red. Here the opponents are distinguishing between efficient cause, that is nimitta karana, and material cause, that is upadana karana. An efficient cause is externally related to its effect and can be heterogeneous to it. For example, a weaver is an efficient cause of the cloth. He or she is externally related to it and can be heterogeneous with it. For example, a weaver is sentient, whereas the cloth produced is insentient. But threads are the material cause of the cloth. They are internally related to it and have to be homogeneous with it according to the opponents of Charvaka. So the opponents think that if consciousness has a material cause, it must be homogeneous with it. The corporeal body being heterogeneous with consciousness cannot be the ground of consciousness, because body is material but consciousness is not material. So they imagine a non-corporeal substance which they call Atman, Purusha, Jiva, etc. as the cause or abode of consciousness. Buddhists do not believe in the substance called Atman, but they accept a continuum, santana, of consciousness and regard immediately preceding consciousness as the immediate cause, that is samanantara pratyaya, of the occurrence of consciousness at any given moment. Hence, it becomes a task for Charvakas to present their argument in such a strong way that it will answer this objection. Charvakas try to fulfill this task by using the above metaphors. The metaphors are modeled to show how a material cause can produce an effect which is entirely new, different, and hence heterogeneous with it. Molasses, that is, quinoa, the word used is quinoa, that is the raw material used for producing liquor, does not have the intoxicating power, but this quality arises through the process of fermentation. Similarly, the betel leaf and other ingredients of pan do not initially have red color, but the red color arises anew through the process of mixing and chewing them. Similarly, consciousness, which was not there before in the material elements, Prithvi, Aap, Tejas and Vayu, can arise in them if the elements combine in a peculiar way so as to form an organic body. Here the notions of processing, mixing, chewing and peculiar combination are significant, though Charvakas have only suggested but not used them explicitly. They may remind us of the distinction we are taught in the school chemistry between chemical compounds and mixtures. In a mixture, the ingredients which are mixed do not lose their own properties, but only add to each other's properties. But a chemical compound can have an entirely new property, different from the properties of its components. For example, lime juice mixed with sugar and salt has a taste which is sweet, sour, and salty. It does not have an entirely different taste, heterogeneous with the original taste, because it is just a mixture and not a chemical compound. But water, H2O, is a chemical compound of hydrogen and oxygen and has an entirely different property, useful for extinguishing fire, than the properties of its components, namely hydrogen, which is inflammable, and oxygen, which helps burning. Similarly, Charvakas are suggesting corporeal body is not just 4 elements put together, but their biochemical compound, which assumes an entirely different property, namely sentience, which was not there in the material elements. Hence, Charvakas, through their argument, are trying to convey two things. One, consciousness must be arising from body and not from a cause external to body, because it is inseparable from body. This is one. And two, consciousness can arise from body although it is heterogeneous with the latter, because an entirely new property can arise in a chemical compound, like it happens in the case of intoxicating power of liquor and red color in palm. The inference for Charvaka materialism, as formulated above, falls under the category of non-verifiable inference. It is based on a very general type of generalization about heterogeneous material causation in general, and not about the law of origination of consciousness from material body, which is a special case of heterogeneous material causation. Hence, it is a kind of analogical inference, because intoxicating power which is generated in molasses is just a metaphor or analogy for consciousness and not an instance of it. Now the question is, would such a non-verifiable analogical inference be acceptable in the Charvaka epistemological framework, and if so, under what conditions would it be acceptable? Here I want to suggest that although the above argument is a case of non-verifiable inference, it can still be acceptable to mitigated empiricist Charvakas on the ground that it is loka prasiddha, that is acceptable within the framework of the worldly way of life. The relation between reason property and target property, that is hetu and sadhya, in this inference is not based on logical necessity or empirical necessity, but what can be called explanatory necessity. One is claiming here that just as the power of intoxication in processed molasses cannot be explained without accepting their origin in the fermented molasses themselves, similarly consciousness which is found in body and not found outside it cannot be explained satisfactorily without accepting its origin in the material body itself. Just as the intoxicating power in the molasses cannot be explained satisfactorily as a transcendent entity having an isolated existence or as having a mysterious source, similarly consciousness in the body cannot be explained satisfactorily as a transcendent entity having an isolated existence or as having a mysterious source. Since the inference of the transmigrating soul as the substratum of consciousness lacks explanatory necessity, and therefore it is not acceptable. But inference of matter as the cause of consciousness or the living body itself as the locus of consciousness is acceptable because it has explanatory necessity. I have tried to take some steps towards reinterpretation and reconstruction of the mitigated empiricist Charvaka epistemology. I have tried to argue that it can be stated in a stronger form which can counter the idealist and otherworldly claims of the religious philosophers and also give a fuller explanation of the secular life. Religious systems of philosophy attributed extreme empiricism to Charvakas as their official philosophy, and then attacked it as a soft target. They argued that if Charvakas do not accept inference as Praman, then they would commit pragmatic contradiction. Because when Charvaka says that inference is not a Pramana, he presupposes that the other person understands what he says. Understanding what the other person says is a kind of inferential knowledge. Hence, while saying that inference is not Pramana, Charvakas are presupposing that inferential knowledge is a fact. This is a pragmatic contradiction. I mean, this is an argument which is suggested by Dharmakirti also when he talks about Anumana Badhita Pakshabhas. From Charvaka side, two responses are possible. One response would be extreme empiricist and the other would be mitigated empiricist. Extreme empiricist response would be this. When Charvakas deny inferential knowledge, what they deny is its certainty. They do not deny possibility or probability. And when they presuppose that the other person can understand what he says, they are accepting inferential knowledge as at probabilistic level. There is no contradiction between accepting inferential knowledge at probabilistic level and denying certainty of inferential knowledge claims. This would be the possible answer from extreme empiricist Charvakas. Mitigated empiricist response would be of a different type. Opponents were saying that the denial of inferences as means to knowledge is inconsistent with the common worldly practices such as linguistic communication. Now, mitigated empiricist Charvakas are saying that okay, in that case, let us accept those inferences as means to knowledge which are consistent with common worldly practices. Hence, they render consistency with these worldly practices itself as the criterion of the acceptability of an inference and deny those inferences which transgress the limits of these worldly practices. Hence, what the opponents claim to be the weakness of Charvaka epistemology, namely inconsistency with common worldly experiences, worldly practices, the mitigated empiricist Charvakas turned it into its strength, namely rootedness in the common worldly practices. This brings us to the conclusion of the series of lectures on the epistemology of the heterodox schools of Indian philosophy. A question can be asked here about the relevance of what we did. The question rather pertains to relevance of epistemology to our view of the world and the view of life. In what follows, I will make some remarks in this direction. Relevance of epistemology to ontology and axiology. Epistemology has two aspects, cognitive epistemology and justificatory epistemology. Hence, pramanas are understood as means to knowledge as well as means to justification. But in Indian philosophy, epistemology is not studied for itself, whether it is cognitive epistemology or justificatory epistemology. In Indian philosophy, every darshana has pramana component, but along with it, it has prameya component and also purushartha component. In other words, every school of Indian philosophy has a theory of knowledge, epistemology, theory of reality, ontology, and a theory of values, axiology. And all the three theories are interconnected. It is interesting to see in brief how the epistemologies that we have studied are relevant to the respective ontologies and axiologies. The relation between epistemology on the one hand and ontology and axiology on the other hand is a bilateral relation. From the side of epistemology, it is claimed that the pramanas are the basis of both prameya and purushartha. From the other side, it can be said that the beliefs about reality and values of life come first. The theory of pramanas is developed later for the justification of the specific ontology and axiology. My only point here is that epistemology is relevant to the two other disciplines this way or that way, since the relation is reciprocal. We have seen that the Nyaya epistemology developed as a tool for justification of Vaisheshika ontology. According to them, the structure of language and the structure of thought reflects structure of reality. All the seven padarthas give us a well-organized structure of the world, with the governor of the world called God. God is supposed to be creator of language, that of Vedas, and also the Varna caste based hierarchical structure of the society. Nayayikas developed the theory of knowledge in the justification of this structure of the world and society. Then we come to Buddhism. Buddhists believed that the most of the elements of the world that Nyaya Vaisheshikas regarded as real were in fact false mental constructions. The real world is empty of these false constructions. Hence they developed the epistemology which could examine and eliminate the false constructions. Nagarjuna regarded the world as empty of false constructions by developing the epistemological tool of prasanga method. Dignaga and Dharmakirti developed the epistemology of two pramanas which correspond to the two prameyas, namely Swalakshana and Samanya Lakshana. Accordingly, only Swalakshanas are real and Samanya Lakshanas are unreal mental constructs. Vaisheshika categories are the examples of false mental constructs. Then we come to Jainism. Jainas accepted a pluralist and non-absolutist ontology. According to it, the apparently contradictory elements of the world are mixed with each other without any conflict. In order to support this picture of the world, they developed the epistemology of Pramana and Naya. Accordingly, Naya gives a partial understanding of the world, whereas Agama Pramana in the form of Syadvada gives a holistic and non-absolutistic understanding. And we come to Charvakas. Charvakas were critical about the ontologies of all other systems which believed in the existence of other worlds such as Swarga and Naraka, and the transcendent entities such as soul, karma and God. We have seen that different Charvakas developed different epistemological approaches, from no pramana approach of the skeptic Charvakas to two pramanas approach of the more learned Charvakas. But in all these epistemological models, Charvakas were careful in avoiding otherworldly and transcendental metaphysics. Now, the relation between epistemology and axiology. The epistemologies developed by these systems also had relevance for the values of life. We have seen that orthodox schools accepted Vedas as pramana. On the basis of Vedas as pramana, they tried to justify the hierarchical social order and the Vedic ritualism. Heterodox schools were generally opposed to these values. Buddhism and Jainism believed in otherworldly values and the transcendent state of liberation. They also accepted agamas in support of these transcendent values, but they were opposed to Vedas as the authority. Hence, they did not associate their value system with Varna caste system or Vedic ritualism. Then, relation between epistemology and axiology in Charvaka. Charvakas were opposed to transcendental values altogether. Hence, they did not accept in their epistemology any agama as pramana, either Vedic or non-Vedic. The epistemological apparatus of the perception and empirical inference or commonsensical inference was helpful to more educated Charvakas in asserting the worldly values such as kama and artha and in rejecting the values such as dharma and moksha in their transcendental form. The study of the theory of knowledge, therefore, is important not only for itself as a purely intellectual exercise, but it is important for developing a right worldview and a reasonable view of life. Thank you. सॉरी
मराठीत
हां बोला बोला जरूर हां
जीव, जीवात्मा, आत्मा, ब्रह्म आणि माया यात फरक काय?
हा माझ्याचा विषय नाही आहे माझ्या
उल्लेख लावून विचारा घ्या.
हं.
मनाने येत असेल बहुतेक.
हं? नाही हे जे आहे हे सगळं वेदांतात जे मान्य केलेलं आहे ना ते माझा आजचा विषय मुख्य होता चार्वाकांचं ज्ञानमीमांसा की ज्या अनुभवाला न येणाऱ्या गोष्टी आहेत ज्या अनुभवाला येऊ शकत नाहीत किंवा अनुभवाच्या स्पष्टीकरणासाठी जे मानण्याची आवश्यकता नाही अशा गोष्टी ह्या मानायच्या नाही. त्यामुळे तुम्ही जे काय म्हणताय ते त्याबद्दल म्हणजे आता मुख्यतः आजचा विषय चार्वाक असल्यामुळे ते असा प्रश्न विचारतील की तुम्हाला काय म्हणायचं आहे त्याच्यातून ते अनुभवाला येतं का ते जर अनुभव कुठल्या प्रमाणाने तुम्ही ते सिद्ध करणार. मुख्य प्रश्न इथे काय असतो की प्रमाणांच्या आधारे तुम्हाला ते सिद्ध करता आलं पाहिजे किंवा कुठल्या प्रमाणाच्या आधारे तुम्हाला ते कळलं ते तुम्हाला सांगता आलं पाहिजे. तर तसं प्रमाण म्हणजे वेदांत यांच्याकडे ज्या वेळेला ते या गोष्टींविषयी बोलतात त्यावेळेला त्यांच्याकडे मुख्य प्रमाण हे वेद हे असतं उपनिषद हे असतं शब्दप्रमाण असतं की जे ज्याचं प्रामाण्य हे अनुभवाच्या आधारे प्रत्यक्षाच्या आधारे किंवा अनुमानाच्या आधारे सिद्ध करता येत नाही. हा चार्वाकांचा त्या बाबतीत मुख्य आक्षेप असेल. आणि मी म्हणजे मला कडनं ही अपेक्षा करू नका प्लीज की मी त्यांचं स्पष्टीकरण दिलं पाहिजे की वेदांतांना नेमकं काय म्हणायचं आहे कारण तो माझा अभ्यासाचा विषय नाही.
चार्वाक नास्तिक आहेत ना म्हणून मी हा प्रश्न विचारला त्यांचं त्याच्याविषयीचं मत काय आहे? नास्तिक म्हणजे टोटल त्यांनी नाकारलंच आहे काय सगळं?
हो नाही या गोष्टी नाकारल्यात ना म्हणजे ब्रह्म ईश्वर आत्मा
नाकारल्यात.
नाकारल्या.
ऋणम कित्या काय ते ऋणम कर्ज घेणे तुप्य असं आहे त्याचं काय ते
असं
त्यांनीच
असं
मांडलंय.
मत त्यांच्या नावावर नोंदवलं जातं. ते इतिहास काळामध्ये नंतर चार्वाक विरोधकांनी हे वचन त्यांच्या तोंडी घातलेले आहे.
Any other question?
Thank you so much. My question to you is, I've heard many times that you personally don't believe in next life. So I personally believe in next life. So what is the reason? You based on your experience or you based on any anumana? Thank you.
So I should have some strong say evidence or some strong basis on the basis of which I should believe in the next life. And so far I have not gathered any such strong evidence or strong basis on the basis of it. Okay, so why should I believe? And many times these beliefs are supported for two types of purposes. One is just because it is written in scriptures and we believe in those scriptures.
Sir, mic जवळ आहे, मागे ऐकू.
So this is one possible ground of the believers. Is it working? So one possible ground is that just because people have been believing in it and apparently many things which for which we do not have any satisfactory explanation. Belief in rebirth, belief in life after death apparently gives some kind of explanation. Whether that explanation is correct or not, one does not go for investigation at all. It gives psychologically, it satisfies. Secondly, it is regarded as a kind of basis for justification of morality and also diversity in the world. So there has to be some reason behind, some not just cause, but some reason behind this diversity in the world. Some people are, suffer, some people, and that should be explainable in terms of karma doctrine. That is, it should be a kind of just thing that I should suffer because of my own wrongdoings and not because of someone else's crime. So this is again a belief in the justice in the universe, that there is just order in the universe. And therefore, that just order, if it is to be explained, then all my sufferings and all my pleasures cannot be explained in terms of my own actions in this life. So people tend to believe that it must be because of my previous karmas. Before my birth, I must have conducted some actions because of which I am suffering or I am having some happiness in this life. But for me, I mean, this is again a presupposition that there is just order in this universe. And it has certain undesirable conclusions also, that if people are suffering, it is because of their own actions, so let us not bother about that. Okay, so there is inequality in this universe, there are injustices taking place in this universe, but since at a larger scale there is a just order, so all these so-called injustices are not injustices at all, so why to bother about them? And this is a possible consequence which is not acceptable to me. So if there are, I mean, we have values, all right, and we should try to cherish those values, protect those values, that injustices are injustices. So let us try to reduce them, let us try to remove them and establish a just social order. So just social order is not something given, it is something which is to be brought about through efforts by all of us. This is my approach. Anyway.
चार्वाक तत्वज्ञान प्रतिक्रियावादी आहे. वैदिक तत्वज्ञानाच्या विरोधात उभं राहिलेलं एक तत्वज्ञान आहे असं आपल्याला वाटतं का? प्रतिक्रियावादी आहे असं वाटतं?
काय आहे, प्रतिक्रियावादी असं म्हणताना त्यांना मुळात काहीच म्हणायचं नाहीये आणि ते केवळ इतरांनी म्हटल्यामुळे ती प्रतिक्रिया उमटली आहे असं म्हणण्यापेक्षा मी असं म्हणेन की हे खूप नॅचरल आहे. हे चार्वाक तत्वज्ञान हे फार तुम्हाला म्हणजे काल्पनिक पातळीवर डोकं न वापरता सुद्धा समजण्यासारखं आहे. पण ज्या वेळेला काल्पनिक तत्वज्ञानाचं अतिक्रमण होईल त्यावेळेला त्याला उत्तर देण्यासाठी चार्वाकाला काहीतरी तत्वज्ञानाच्या स्वरूपात मांडणं भाग आहे, नाहीतर मुद्दाम तत्वज्ञानाच्या स्वरूपात काही मांडायची गरजही नाही. की प्रमाणं कुठली आहेत वगैरे हे सगळं नॅचरली आपण जीवन जगत असताना जर आपण काही काल्पनिक श्रद्धा स्वीकारल्या नाहीत तर ते सहज आहे. त्याच्यामध्ये म्हणजे प्रतिक्रियात्मक असं म्हणायचं कारण नाही. तसं प्रत्येक दर्शन हे त्याला प्रतिक्रियात्मक स्वरूप येतच, कारण त्यांच्यामध्ये परस्पर संघर्ष सुरू असतो आणि या क्रिया प्रतिक्रियांमधनं ही दर्शनं सगळी विकसित झालेली आहेत. त्यामुळे केवळ चार्वाकाच्याच बाबतीत असं म्हणायचं कारण नाही की ते प्रतिक्रियात्मक आहे.
मी ते वैदिक तत्वज्ञानाच्या पर्स्पेक्टिव्हने विचारतो तुम्हाला, त्याच्या विरोधातली प्रतिक्रियात्मक आहे का?
म्हणजे आता वैदिक तत्वज्ञानात सुद्धा जे उल्लेख येतात चार्वाकांचे ते प्रत्येक वेळेला ते विरोधकाच्या स्वरूपात येत नाहीत. आता माणूस म्हणजे आता कुठलं उपनिषदात तर ते मुंडकोपनिषद असेल बहुतेक, एनिवे, तर तिथे माणूस मेल्यानंतर काही जण असं म्हणतात की तो नाही आहे. कठोपनिषद, बरोबर, कठोपनिषदाच्या सुरुवातीला की आणि काही जण म्हणतात की तो आहे. तेव्हा ह्याच्यातलं यम आणि नचिकेत यांच्यातल्या संवादामध्ये तो यमाला विचारतो की ह्याच्यातलं खरं काय आहे ते मला सांग. अस्तित्वके नायम अस्तिती चैके. आता ह्याच्यामध्ये अस्ति असं म्हणणारे जे आहेत की तो आहे अजूनही असं म्हणणारे आस्तिक आहेत आणि तो आता नाही आहे, संपला तो, असं म्हणणारे नास्तिक आहेत. आता त्याच्यासाठी ते काही प्रतिक्रियात्मक विचार नाही आहे, तो अतिशय उत्स्फूर्त आणि सहज विचार आहे असं मला वाटतं. पण त्याला ज्या वेळेला यांच्यामध्ये वादविवादाचं स्वरूप येतं तेव्हा साहजिकच या दोन्ही प्रतिक्रियात्मक असतात. तिकडे एक सॉरी त्यांनी हात वर केला होता.
My question to you is, does the Charvak system have any axiological or ethical system, and if so, what will be the basis for it, since like ethics presupposes some kind of judgment or some reward or punishment at the end of this life?
I'm sorry, the question is not clear.
The Charvaka system, so do they have any system of ethics or values, and if so, what would be their, why would they have such a thing? Because doesn't like ethics or morality presuppose some kind of judgment or some punishment or reward which you get like in this, like after this life or something
No,
like that?
I mean, morality or ethics is not necessarily related to afterlife. Okay, even within this life, how do we decide that something is good and something is bad? Or something is my duty and something is not, something is prohibited. On what basis? And there Charvakas would present only some kind of hedonistic basis, whatever leads to pleasure, and that hedonism may sometimes take form of universalistic hedonism also. It is not necessarily egoistic hedonism. There were Charvakas who were concerned with happiness of all, pleasure of all. But then that pleasure or happiness is not something which we have to achieve after death, but within this life, and how we can achieve it. So that was their concern, and their so-called ethics is based on those considerations. I'm sorry. इकडे ठीक आहे बोला. Yes.
आपण प्रमाण हा शब्द थ्रूआउट वापरलाय, बट त्याला इंग्लिशमध्ये शब्द नाही वापरलेला का? म्हणजे इज देअर एनी इक्विव्हॅलंट वर्ड, एक्झॅक्ट इक्विव्हॅलंट?
नाही, साधारणपणे मीन्स टू नॉलेज हा एक त्याचं भाषांतर असतं, आणि दुसरं ऑथॉरिटेटिव्ह मीन्स टू नॉलेज, ऑथॉरिटी.
पण सिंगल वर्ड नाही असं ऑथर. म्हणजे वेस्टर्न जेव्हा एपिस्टेमॉलॉजिस्ट डिस्कस करतात तेव्हा त्या फॉर प्रमाण देअर मस्ट बी अ सिंगल वर्ड.
No, they talk about knowledge. What are the criteria of knowledge? What is the definition of knowledge?
Okay.
They are not concerned very much with the question of means to knowledge or instruments of knowledge.
So that is specialty of Indian epistemology, Praman concept.
The concept of Pramana, but even in Indian philosophy, sometimes the word Pramana is translated as knowledge only.
Okay.
Only Nayayikas insisted on the distinction between Prama and Pramana. So Prama is knowledge, Pramana is means to knowledge, and there has to be a distinction between the two according to Nyaya system. But others, I mean, for example, Buddhists and Jainas, they say that knowledge itself is Pramana, and within that knowledge itself we can distinguish between the process, the result, and the means. It is not proper to go outside this knowledge in order to search for its means or its result. I mean, so there are controversies on this also. The word Pramana is sometimes used in the Bhava sense and sometimes in Karana sense. Karana is means, Bhava is a being of knowledge or means to knowledge. In both the senses the word is used. And so while reading those texts, we have to first see in what sense the word is used in that particular context.
Okay. Another question. Verbal testimony. What is the difference between verbal testimony and axioms? Because for any discipline, one starts with certain axioms which cannot be questioned, and everything, the whole superstructure is based on that foundation. You don't question foundation. So can verbal testimony be
they cannot be equated, because verbal testimony is understood as Agama Pramana or Shabda Pramana, and there are two senses in which it is used in Indian tradition. Either it is Aptavakya, the statement made by a reliable person. So when you are talking of axioms, we need not accept a particular axiom because our teacher tells us, or because some authority tells us, and therefore we accept it as axioms. And they are something like necessary presuppositions which we cannot deny, maybe. So they are based on our intuition or some kind of idea of self-evidence, but not necessarily Agama Pramana. The other sense of Agama Pramana is Apaurusheya. Mimamsakas say that Vedas are not statements uttered by any reliable person or even by God, but they are self-evident, and so we just have to accept them as self-evident. They are apaurushaya. But even that is not the idea in the idea of action that you are talking about. It is more independent of some external authority. Yes. Just a minute, because there are some people who have raised hand already. Sorry.
Just raise your hand so that we know you have questions and we can pass on the mic accordingly.
हॅलो. आजच्या विज्ञानाच्या प्रगतीच्या अनुषंगाने चार्वाक समजा आज असता तर त्यांनी हेच मत मांडलेलं असतं का? मला हा मुद्दा तुम्हाला प्रश्न विचारायचा की तुम्ही त्याचा सपोर्ट करत आहात. मग आज तुम्ही चार्वाक आहात असं समजून ह्या प्रश्न उत्तर द्या.
नाही, म्हणजे चार्वाक एखादा सायंटिस्ट असेल आजचा की जो घरी गेल्यावर सत्यनारायणाची पूजा करत नसेल, तो आजचा चार्वाक असेल असं मी म्हणेन.
मान्य.
आणि त्यामुळे चार्वाक ही एक व्यापक कॅटेगरी या दृष्टीने की जो केवळ कोणीतरी सांगितलंय, केवळ ती एक परंपरेने चालत आलाय म्हणून तो मानणार नाही, तो क्वेश्चन करेल आणि जे अनिवार्यपणे मानणं भाग आहे ते तो मानेल, जे अनुभव आणि बुद्धी यांचा वापर करून जे अटळपणे मान्य करावं लागत असेल ते तो मानेल. आणि या अर्थाने आज आपल्याला असे अनेक चार्वाक मत असेल सापडू शकतील आणि विज्ञान ही गोष्ट त्याला पूरक आहे असं आपण म्हणू. इथे सुद्धा आहे बरं काय.
आत्ता त्यांनी जो त्या मुलाने जो प्रश्न विचारला की आपण जर हे मानलंच नाही, म्हणजे जसं तुमचं पण विचार आहे की प्री सपोजिशन करायचंच नाही की देर इज अ म्हणजे कर्म डॉक्ट्रीन आपण हे केली नाही, तर मग मूळ जो आपण व्हॅल्यूज शब्द वापरतो तोच नष्ट होऊन जातो ना. मग कुणाला कशाला व्हॅल्यूज म्हणायचे? जर आपल्याला प्लेजर म्हणजे एकाच्या मते प्लेजर आहे बाय किलिंग समबडी ऑल्सो ही इज गेटिंग अ प्लेजर, मग त्याला व्हॅल्यू म्हणायचे का मग त्याला नाही म्हणायचं, हा एक माझा प्रश्न. आणि दुसरा प्रश्न तुम्हाला वैयक्तिक की जर तुम्ही म्हणाला की माझं लाईफ आफ्टर डेथ यू डोंट बिलीव्ह, सो अकॉर्डिंग टू यू व्हॉट इज द रिझन ऑफ सफरिंग, आणि मग व्हाय वी डोंट हॅव अ फ्रीडम to take birth in some places, why I don't have a freedom to take birth at Ambani's place, or why it is not. So ह्याचे प्रश्नाचे उत्तर तुमच्याप्रमाणे काय आहे की if we don't believe in karma doctrine, then we should have a freedom, right, to take decisions of such things. मग sufferings, why, what is the reason of sufferings from your perspective?
हा म्हणजे दोन प्रश्न आहेत. एक पहिला आहे तो मूल्य या कल्पनेत, व्हॅल्यूज. तर असं आहे की ज्यावेळेला आपण केवळ व्यक्तिगत सुखाचा विचार न करता इतरांच्याही सुखाचा आणि काहीतरी आपण एक जनरल प्रिन्सिपल शोधतो की म्हणजे माझ्या दुःखाची कारणं काय आहेत, माझ्या सुखाची मला कशामुळे सुख मिळतं, आणि मग मला जे सुख मिळतं त्या सुखाचं पुन्हा ॲनालिसिस होऊ शकतं की ते तात्पुरतं सुख आहे का दीर्घकाळ आहे, आणि ते दीर्घकाळ सुख त्याच्यावरून मला परमसुख शाश्वत सुख इथे उडी मारायची गरज नाही. मी माझ्या आयुष्यापुरता विचार करतो की केवळ मला तात्पुरतं सुख असं नाही, तर त्याचं रूपांतर जर दुःखात होणार असेल तर तशा प्रकारचं सुख मला नको. आणि त्याचप्रमाणे ज्या माझ्या सुखामध्ये इतरही सहभागी होऊ शकतील असं सुख हे मला जास्त समाधानकारक असू शकतं. म्हणजे केवळ व्यक्तिगत सुखापेक्षा माणूस हा एक सामाजिक प्राणी पण आहे. आणि म्हणजे हा जो सगळा भाग आहे, जसं आता पाश्चात्य तत्त्वज्ञानामध्ये जॉन स्टुअर्ट मिल याचं युटिलिटेरियनिझम हा त्यांनी उपयुक्ततावाद मांडला. त्यामध्ये कुठेही त्यांनी ईश्वर किंवा परलोक वगैरे असला काही विचार न करता ज्याचा मी माझ्या सुखाचं मी ज्याला जनरलायझेशन करतो आणि जास्तीत जास्त जणांचं जास्तीत जास्त सुख कशामध्ये सामावलेलं आहे किंवा सगळ्यांचं सुख कशामध्ये सामावलेलं आहे असा विचार ज्यावेळेला करतो त्यावेळेला त्यातून मूल्य ही कल्पना उद्भवू शकते. अदरवाईज अर्थात मी केवळ स्वतःच्या सुखाचा विचार केला तरी मी असं म्हणू शकतो की हेच माझ्यासाठी मूल्य आहे. किंवा मूल्य म्हणजे काय, जे असलं पाहिजे ते, आणि त्याची मिनिमम व्याख्या आहे मूल्य म्हणजे. ते जे काय
असलं पाहिजे, त्याला का असलं पाहिजे त्याला सुद्धा रिझन असायला पाहिजे की बाबा हे चांगलं आहे. मग ते चांगलं कशा, मग काय चांगलं,
हा जो विचार आहे हा माणसाच्या सामाजिकतेतून निर्माण होतो असं मला वाटतं.
फक्त सोशल ह्याच्यापुरतं मर्यादित राहतं की
आणि ही सामाजिकता मी सर्वव्यापी सुद्धा करू शकतो. ही सामाजिकता मी माणसाचं क्षेत्र च्या बाहेर जाऊन मी प्राण्यांनाही त्यात समाविष्ट करू शकतो. तेव्हा हे शेवटी चिंतन तुम्ही जसं व्यापक, तुमचा विचार तुम्ही स्वतःपुरता न ठेवता जर व्यापक ठेवलात तर त्यातनं वेगळ्या प्रकारची मूल्य निर्माण होऊ शकतात आणि त्यातून, त्या मूल्यातून एक वेगळं समाधान सुद्धा तुम्हाला मिळू शकतं. म्हणजे हा सुद्धा पुन्हा अशा प्रकारचं जे सुख आहे की ज्यामध्ये मी सगळ्यांच्या सुखाचा विचार समाविष्ट आहे, ते सुख हे उच्च दर्जाचं आहे असा विचार मी करू शकतो. ते करण्यासाठी मला म्हणजे पुन्हा काहीतरी पारलौकिक मानायची गरज नाही.
आणि जो दुसरा मुद्दा मी सांगितला की तुम्ही म्हणता की देर इज, हा प्री सपोजिशन आहे लाईफ आफ्टर डेथचा, तर मी विचारलं की व्हाय देर इज नो फ्रीडम. मग तसं असेल तर आपल्याला आयुष्य आपलं कसं अंत करू शकतो, म्हणजे कुणी ॲक्सिडेंटल डेथ पण जातं, कुणी पूर्ण आयुष्य जगून जातं, तर मग ह्याच्यात पण आपल्याला फ्रीडम पाहिजे ना. माझा हे
पाहिजे म्हणजे कोणा पाहिजे, कोण तुम्हाला देणार आहे फ्रीडम?
नाही म्हणजे
इनफॅक्ट आहे माणसाच्या अस्तित्वाला आणि माणसांच्या क्षमतांना मर्यादा आहेत. ही वस्तुस्थिती आहे आणि ही वस्तुस्थिती गृहीत धरून आपल्याला शक्यतांचा विचार करायचा आहे की काय, व्हॉट इज बेस्ट पॉसिबल.
पण मग तुमच्या मते सफरिंगला रिझन काय? जर आपण प्रीसपोजिशन कार्मिक डॉक्ट्रिन संपवलं तर व्हाय देयर आर सफरिंग?
पुन्हा आपल्याला वेदना म्हणजे दुःख वेदना आणि माणसाची दुःखी अवस्था, दुःखी असणं, या दोन्हीमध्ये फरक करायला लागेल. म्हणजे एखाद्याला खूप वेदना अनुभवाला येत आहेत पण तो अनुभव घेतोय, त्याच्यामुळे तो दुःखी होत नाहीये. आणि दुसरा एखादा माणूस, त्याला फारसं काही वेदना जरी झाल्या नाहीत तरी तो छोट्या छोट्या कारणांनी किंवा कारणाशिवाय सुद्धा दुःखी होतोय. तेव्हा ह्या दुःखाचं मूळ शोधताना आपल्याला या दोन गोष्टींचा वेगळा विचार करायला लागेल. नुसतं दुःख वेदना असं म्हटलं तर त्याची बाह्य कारणं सुद्धा असू शकतात, पण हे दुसऱ्या प्रकारचं जे दुःख आहे की मी दुःखी असणं, तिथे बाह्य कारणापेक्षा आंतरिक कारणं ही जास्त महत्त्वाची असतात. आणि तिथे मग लोकांनी जो विचार केलेला आहे की तृष्णा हे दुःखाचं मूळ आहे, मी वेगवेगळ्या गोष्टींच्या सुखाच्या मागे जो धावत असतो त्याच्यामुळे मला त्याच्यामध्ये निराशा आली की मी दुःखी होतो, पण मी जर आसक्ती माझी नसेल तर मी तसं दुःख मला होणार नाही. हा सगळा विचार, ही सगळी सायकोलॉजी आहे माझ्या मते. याच्यासाठी पुन्हा असं काहीतरी मानायची गरज नाही की जे पलीकडे असेल.
मग फ्रीडमचं काय? फ्रीडमचं काय? मग आपण हे सगळं मानलं की आसक्ती वगैरे हे सगळं मानलं, पण मग आपल्याला फ्रीडम का नाहीये? मग हे सगळं डिसाईड करायचं आहे, जन्म मृत्यू
नाही, ही फॅक्ट आहे ना. म्हणजे जी वस्तुस्थिती आहे ती का तशी आहे त्याच्यामागे काहीतरी म्हणजे रिझन असलं पाहिजे. हेच आपलं एक चुकीचं गृहीत आहे ना. म्हणजे हे जग असं असण्यामागे काहीतरी विचार आहे, कुणाचा तरी, कुठल्या तरी ईश्वराचा, हे गृहीत आहे. ते गृहीत मला वाटतं अजून पुष्कळ लोक आहेत.
त्यांचं उत्तर देऊ शकते. नंतर भेटा, मी उत्तर देते.
हां, ठीक आहे, जरूर जरूर.
चार्वाकांच्या विषयी त्यांचे सगळे हे आर्ग्युमेंट्स हे अनुभवावर सिद्ध असलेलीच त्यांनी सांगितले आहेत आणि तसं आपण एक विवेचन केलं. पण शंकराचार्य आगम वगैरे त्याला सपोर्ट करण्यासाठी त्यांची आर्ग्युमेंट्स होती असं म्हणतात. पण शंकराचार्यांचा एक, शंकर भाषेत एक असा स्पष्ट श्लोक आहे की अग्नी शीतल आहे असं कुठेतरी लिहिलेलं दिसलं वेदात वगैरे, तर ते मी कधीही मानणार नाही म्हणून. म्हणजे ते अनुभवाला महत्व देत होते असं त्यातनं दिसून येतं त्या ह्याच्यात. म्हणजे मला काय वाटतं की जसे याच्यात स्ट्रॉंग आणि वीक सेन्स असे इकडे दाखवले, इथं हटवादी शब्दप्रमाणवादीही असू शकतील आणि काही सॉफ्टही असू शकतील.
जरूर, पण बरोबर आहे. याच्यामध्ये असं आहे की म्हणजे पूर्वमीमांसक आणि वेदांती या दोघांनाही ते दोघेही ज्यावेळेला शब्दप्रमाण मानतात त्यावेळेला शब्दप्रमाण हे आपल्या प्रत्यक्षाच्या विरोधी असू नये हा एक भाग आहे त्याच्यात. पण ज्या प्रत्यक्षातीत गोष्टी आहेत असं ते मानतात. त्याबद्दलच शब्दप्रमाण काहीतरी सांगतं म्हणून ते प्रमाण आहे. हां, म्हणजे समजा पूर्वमीमांसकांच्या दृष्टीने वेद जे प्रमाण आहेत ते काहीतरी स्वर्गाबद्दल बोलतात, ते अपूर्वाबद्दल बोलतात. आपण यज्ञकर्म केलं तर त्याच्यातून काहीतरी अशी अदृश्य शक्ती निर्माण होईल आणि त्याच्यातून आपल्याला स्वर्ग मिळेल. तर या गोष्टींचं व्हेरिफिकेशन होत नाही. त्यामुळे अग्नी थंड आहे या एम्पिरिकल गोष्टी आहेत, पण स्वर्ग आहे ही
जिथं अनुभव नाही तिथं कदाचित ते
तसंच ब्रह्म आहे
पण मला
की ज्याचा अनुभव येत नाही. त्यामुळे वेदांनी ब्रह्म आहे असं म्हटलं तर आपण तर ते म्हणतील की ते अनुभवाच्या विरुद्ध जात नाहीये ना, मग माना.
मला फक्त एक प्रश्न पडतो की आत्ताच्या आयुष्यात मी एक थोडा सुशिक्षित असं काहीतरी अनुभव घेतो, पण काहीतरी सायंटिफिक मोठं काहीतरी वाचलं, चंद्रावर माणूस गेला वगैरे, ज्याचा मला वैयक्तिकरित्या काही अनुभव नाही. तुम्ही कोणाचा तरी याच्यावर
विश्वास ठेवतो. बरोबर आहे.
हे शब्द प्रामाण्य आहे का नाही?
हे शब्द प्रामाण्य आहे.
म्हणजे असं चालू शकतं असं आहे
आणि त्याची मी तपासणी करू शकतो.
आता इथे
आणि
प्रॅक्टिकली कितीतरी अवघड आहे. चंद्रावर जाणे किंवा मोठी इन्स्ट्रुमेंट चेक करणं बोसॉन
अवघड तर आहेच. बरोबर आहे. पण हे सगळं
असं आहे. नाहीतर मला माझ्या आयुष्यात किंवा अगदी तरुण माणसांचं हे शक्य करणं म्हणजे अमेरिकेत जायला लागेल किंवा असं. बरोबर आहे,
मान्य आहे. तेही शब्दप्रमाण आहे आणि त्यांचा दावा असा आहे की ते तुम्ही तपासू शकता. हां, बरोबर.
सर मला वाटतं आता आपण फक्त एक प्रश्न घेऊ शकतो अजून.
या
इकडे हा त्या आधीपासून.
Sorry, maybe I missed this. According to this Charvaka system, what is the theory of creation of this universe, of this world? They believe in the four elements, but the cause also of these four elements and the evolution. What is the theory?
No, naturally they will not say that they are created by God or anything like that. These four elements have been there from time immemorial. I mean, not that they are created. I mean, again, generally all those who believe that there is matter, they would say that matter has been there from the beginning of the world. They will not say that matter has come into existence at some point of time. At the most, Nayayikas, Vaisheshikas, they would say that there were atoms, but then those from atoms compounds were created by God. But for them also this process is beginningless. For Nayayikas, Vaisheshikas also this process is beginningless. So matter has been there. And there is no question of matter being created by someone. From that matter, consciousness has come into existence at some point of time.
They believe something eternal is there.
They
believe something eternal.
Eternal, yes.
No?
Eternal, no.
Eternal.
Yeah, we can say that.
सर मला वाटतं आपल्याला थांबावं लागणार, वेळेची मर्यादा. मला कल्पना आहे की खूप लोकांना खूप प्रश्न आहेत आणि सर व्याख्यानानंतरही नेहमीच उपलब्ध होते, आजही असतील. पण आत्ता इथे थांबूया कारण आपल्याला ह्याच्यानंतर एक छोटासा समारोपाचा कार्यक्रम करायचा आहे ह्या चर्चा सत्राचा पूर्णपणे. सुरुवातीला सर धन्यवाद. सुरुवातीला आपण पुलवामामध्ये शहीद झालेल्या आपल्या जवानांना आपण आधी हे घेऊया. सुरुवातीला आपण पुलवामामध्ये शहीद झालेल्या आपल्या जवानांसाठी श्रद्धांजली देण्यासाठी 2 मिनिटं शांत उभे राहणार आहोत आणि मग कार्यक्रमाला सुरुवात करणार आहोत.
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
नमस्कार. सर्व मान्यवरांचं स्वागत करते. गेले 7 आठवडे अतिशय काय म्हणू मला माहीत नाही, पण हा अतिशय आनंदाचा काळ होता माझ्यासाठी आणि आपल्या सगळ्यांसाठी अशी माझी समजूत आहे. अशा प्रकारचे अनेक फीडबॅक्स मला मिळत राहिलेले आहेत. अतिशय गहन विषय आणि तरीसुद्धा सर्व रविवारी बरोबर 11 वाजता इथे चर्चा सुरू होत असे, व्याख्यान सुरू होत असे आणि पिनड्रॉप सायलन्समध्ये ती ऐकून घेतली जात असे. माझ्यासाठी हा अनुभवही खूप नवीन होता की इतक्या अवघड विषयांसाठी लोक इतक्या सातत्याने येतात आणि इतकी अर्थपूर्ण चर्चा त्याच्यावर होते. मला वाटतं आपल्या या संपूर्ण कार्यक्रमाचं हे खूप मोठं सक्सेस आहे, मोठं यश आहे असं मला वाटतं. मी बौलकर सरांना अशी विनंती करते की त्यांनी सर्व मान्यवरांचं स्वागत करावं आणि पुढच्या कार्यक्रमाला सुरुवात करावी.
इथे या कार्यक्रमाला उपस्थित असलेले भांडारकर संस्थेचे विश्वस्त माननीय प्रदीप दादा रावत, कार्यकारी मंडळाचे अध्यक्ष श्री भोपाल पटवर्धन, इन्फोसिस फाउंडेशनतर्फे ज्या योजना चालू आहेत त्या सगळ्याचं नियोजन करण्यासाठी असलेल्या समितीचे अध्यक्ष प्राध्यापक प्रदीप आपटे, आपले व्याख्याते डॉक्टर प्रदीप गोखले आणि मित्र, इन्फोसिस फाउंडेशनतर्फे जो काही एक विद्याविषयक कार्यक्रम सुरू झालेला आहे त्यामध्ये जानेवारीपासून हा पहिला कार्यक्रम आहे. डॉक्टर प्रदीप गोखले यांचं नाव सुचवण्यात आल्यानंतर मी त्यांना विनंती केली की तुम्ही या कार्यक्रमामध्ये अभ्यागत प्राध्यापक म्हणून या आणि काही एक आम्हाला संशोधन प्रकल्प ही सादर करा, व्याख्यानं द्या. त्यावर त्यांनी शांतपणे सांगितलं की पद स्वीकारलं की बंधन येतं. त्यामुळे त्यांना पदामध्ये, त्यातून मिळणाऱ्या लाभामध्ये, सन्मानामध्ये कशामध्येच रस नसतो ही गोष्ट मला गेली 50 वर्ष माहीत आहे. पण मी म्हटलं की तुमच्या याचा ज्ञानाचा लाभ कधी होणार, आणि या ठिकाणी लोकांनी काम करणं अपेक्षित आहे, बंधनं काही नाही आहेत. बंधन एवढंच आहे की तुम्ही जे ठरवलं ते शिकवायचं आहे, हे तुमचं कामच आहे. ते त्यांनी मान्य केलं. ते काही वर्षभरासाठी 6 महिन्यासाठी वगैरे त्यांनी स्वीकारलं नाही, फक्त 2 महिने जानेवारी आणि फेब्रुवारी, आणि लगेच त्यांनी अभ्यासक्रम त्याचा हा जो व्याख्यानमाला आहे हा एक अभ्यासक्रम, हा कोर्स त्यांनी दिला, 7 व्याख्यानं. त्याचबरोबर त्यांनी एक बौद्ध तत्त्वज्ञान विषयक एक संशोधन प्रकल्पही दिला आहे. छोटासा निबंध आहे, 2 महिन्यामध्ये तो पुरा होईल. फ्रॉम ट्रान्झिशन फ्रॉम दिग्नाग टू धर्मकीर्ती असा विषय आहे, ज्या विषयावर त्यांचे गेले अनेक वर्ष अभ्यास चाललेला आहे. मार्चपासून ते उपलब्धच नाहीत. मला सांगायला आनंद वाटतो की जी आम्हाला खात्री होती त्याप्रमाणेच प्रत्यंतर आलेलं आहे की त्यांनी अत्यंत आखीव रेखीव पद्धतीने, नेहमीच्या पद्धतीने त्यांनी हे व्याख्यानं दिलेली आहेत. त्यांची मी अनेक व्याख्यानं ऐकलेली आहेत. त्यांच्या व्याख्यानामधली सुस्पष्टता विचाराची आणि अवघड विषयसुद्धा जास्तीत जास्त सोप्या पद्धतीने सांगण्याची हातोटी ही विलक्षण आहे. आणि आपल्याला सगळ्यांना फार चांगलं विचाराला खाद्य मिळालं आहे. मी तत्त्वज्ञानाचा फार मोठा अभ्यासक नाही, पण हे सगळं मी पूर्वी एकदा कधीतरी वाचलेलं आहे, पण जणू काही नव्याने ऐकतो आहे अशा पद्धतीने मला तो अनुभव आला. आणि न्याय, बौद्ध, जैन आणि चार्वाक हा जो सगळा विचाराचा प्रवास आहे त्यामध्ये कसे परस्पर गोष्टी गुंतलेल्या आहेत, त्यातला युक्तिवाद काय हे अतिशय चांगल्या पद्धतीने पाहायला मिळाले आपल्याला. त्याबद्दल अतिशय मी त्यांना कृतज्ञ आहे तसं म्हणेन. आणि मी आपला फार जास्त वेळ घेणार नाही. पुढच्या कार्यक्रमाला आपण सुरुवात करूया. होय.
आपल्या सगळ्यांच्या कृतज्ञतेचंच प्रतीक म्हणून आपल्या सगळ्यांच्या वतीने प्रदीपदादांनी गोखले सरांचा सत्कार करावा अशी मी त्यांना विनंती करते. यानंतर ज्यांनी अतिशय रेग्युलरली हे अटेंड केलेलं आहे अशा दोघांच्या आपण प्रातिनिधिक प्रतिक्रिया सगळ्यांसाठी ऐकणार आहोत. मी मानस दिवाण यांना विनंती करेन की त्यांनी त्यांचे प्रतिक्रिया सांगावी आणि त्यानंतर डॉक्टर गौरी भागवत त्यांची प्रतिक्रिया देतील.
Respected members on the dais and my friends, my name is Manas Diwan. I'm actually a corporate guy and more of a hobby philosopher. And to be honest with you, I have therefore never had the opportunity of sitting in a class that has been, taken by Gokhale sir. But thanks to all of you today, I think we have this rare opportunity of listening to such profound wisdom. The last 7 Sundays have been wonderful, not just because it's a holiday, but because it's a rare treat to hear, I would say, the wisdom of ages, which is beautifully concised and presented by Professor Gokhale. Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank the wonderful arrangement of the managing team, Baulkar sir, Wasavi ma'am, and this lovely lady out here. Thank you so much. I mean, you've made it perfect. Anagha, thank you, Anagha. So it's a perfect location, perfect person presenting, and a perfect audience. I think nothing could have been better than this. So thank you very much for having us over, for letting us, experienced people and novices learn something from your wisdom. And I would also like to thank the Infosys Foundation, because coming from the corporate world, I know it's not an easy job to go beyond just, let's say, the corporate interests. But Infosys has always been a thought leader, and here we can again see thought leadership in action. So thank you all, thank you very much. And if I make one last request, the last couple of sessions were truly eye-opening for me as far as Charvaka was concerned. And although we got a little glimpse of Charvak's system, the number of questions I saw in here makes me feel that there could be possibilities of exploring this further. So if I may place a humble request with the organizing committee, do think of a small model of Charvaka. I think we have one of the most profound philosophers on Charvaka system in here. All of us would be really benefited if we could do that. So that's all my humble submission, and thank you once again for having us over.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Diwan. Now I request Dr. Gauri Bhagwat.
Respected members on the dais and on the respected audience also. At the outset, I would like to thank Bori and of course Infosys for arranging so meticulously this series of lectures. It was really an intellectual feast, and I thank heartily both these institutions, particularly Dr. Bavulkar and his team. Everything was said nicely, and hospitality was also very nice. some of the observations I am asked to make. I would rather begin saying, or rather I'll begin with a confession that because of my lack of knowledge in Sanskrit, though I was a student of philosophy and later on a lecturer, I never had a chance to study Indian philosophy that systematically, because textual reading is something you have to do. And fortunately, they arranged Professor Gokhale's lectures. I mean, he was just the right person because he has expertise in both the traditions. And what I feel is, I knew him for the last 30 years for his scholarship, for his rigorous analysis, in-depth knowledge. But the way he was trying to compare different darshanas in philosophy, within Indian philosophy, and at times juxtapose Indian and Western tradition, that was wonderful. Today itself we experience that when he compared Moore with common sense Charvaka, and there were so many such instances. As I said, trained in Western philosophy, particularly in logic also, I was interested in knowing the underpinnings of all these darshanas. Because in Western philosophy, particularly Bertrand Russell, whose Principia Mathematica is a kind of a Bible for us. Now, he was of the opinion that all schools of thought must be classified according to their logic and not by their, say, metaphysics. Now, this is something which, of course, needs to be thoroughly, understood and then challenged. But here I find the kind of bilateral relationship which Professor Gokhale brought out between not only, metaphysics and epistemology, but axiology in particular. Because that is something usually neglected. Many a times we feel, there is a positivistic tradition in Western philosophy which marginalizes this theory of axiology. They usually say that it is something, emotive and all that. But in Indian philosophy, we take view of life very seriously. And though he didn't get much of time for developing all that, I feel that the kind of comparison and interrelationships he was trying to make were very fruitful. There are so many things, but I'll end up by saying that he resembles Sushikshitatara. Why I say Sushikshitatara, but Sushikshitatama Charvaka, who is very Saradaya. He is never, well versed in logic. He is rigorous, but not Tarka Kathor, as we say in Marathi. Very Saradaya. So thank you for those presentations. We have cherished your lectures and you have initiated us in further studies. My only request will be such series of lectures on Indian aesthetics and Indian, metaphysics will be welcome by students and teachers and all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhagwat. May I now request Pradeep Gokhale sir to say something about the lecture series? I mean, I know he has. He must be tired by now, but...
आता मी इंग्रजी भाषिकांची क्षमा मागून मराठीत बोलतो. चुकून इंग्रजी येईल तोंडातून, पण पहिल्यांदा इन्फोसिस म्हणजे भांडारकर इन्स्टिट्यूट आणि त्याचं प्रतिनिधित्व करणारे जे कोणी आहेत त्या सगळ्यांचे मनापासून आभार. बहुलकरांचे मी आभार जर मानायचे असतील तर मग मला केवळ आभार असंच तास 2 तास म्हणत बसावं लागेल. इतक्या बाबतीमध्ये ते सतत मला मदत करत असतात आणि प्रोत्साहन देत असतात. मला म्हणजे हे खरोखर अपेक्षित नव्हतं. अगदी सुरुवातीला ज्यावेळेला आमच्यामध्ये चर्चा झाली त्यावेळेला अशा प्रकारच्या कोर्सला कदाचित एक 10-20 लोक येतील आणि एखाद्या छोट्याशा रूममध्ये आपण त्याची हे करू. पण त्यांनी ज्या पद्धतीने ती प्रसिद्धी दिली त्या प्रसिद्धीमुळे अनेकांना त्याच्यामध्ये इंटरेस्ट निर्माण झाला आणि मोठ्या संख्येने आपण आलात. आणि मला माझा बऱ्याचदा अशा गोष्टींमध्ये एक स्वार्थ असतो की म्हणजे त्यातून मला काहीतरी शिकायला मिळावं, त्याच्यातून मला काहीतरी नव्याने त्याच विषयाकडे बघता यावं. आणि ते काही प्रमाणात साध्य झालं. म्हणजे मुळात मी हीच व्याख्यानं एक जर्मन स्टुडंटसाठी दिली होती आणि त्यावेळेला देत असताना प्रॉब्लेम असा होता की त्या सगळ्या विद्यार्थ्यांना संस्कृत वगैरेची अजिबात बॅकग्राऊंड नव्हती आणि त्याच्यामुळे संस्कृत पूर्णपणे टाळून मला ती व्याख्यानं मी तयार केली होती. आणि इथे मी जेव्हा सुरुवात केली तेव्हा पहिल्याच व्याख्यानामध्ये लोक म्हणायला लागले की हे तुम्ही सगळे इंग्रजी शब्द वापरतायत ते आम्हाला काही कळत नाही आहेत. मग मला त्या व्याख्यानांमधले सगळे ते सगळ्या सो कॉल्ड टेक्निकल टर्म्स या मूळ संस्कृतातल्या टेक्निकल टर्म्स वापरून मला ती नव्याने ती तयार करायला लागली. आणि अर्थातच ते तयार करत असताना पुन्हा नवीन नवीन काही विषय त्याच्यातनं इथे कुठेतरी आपण इथे स्पष्ट नाही होत पुरेसे, मग ते अजून कसं स्पष्टता आणता येईल ह्याच्यातून काही नवीन मला व्याख्यानं तयार करायची संधी मिळाली. तो माझा मोठा लाभ झाला त्याच्यातून. आणि आपल्यासारखे अनेक मित्र की ज्यांच्याशी थोडाफार तात्विक संवाद होऊ शकेल असे मला या निमित्ताने मिळाले. त्याबद्दल मी या संस्थांचा आणि आपला सगळ्यांचा ऋणी आहे. धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद सर. अगदी थोडक्यात काही डेटा किंवा माहिती सांगते की या आपल्या कोर्सला आत्तापर्यंत साधारण 96 लोकांनी रजिस्टर केलं आणि सरासरी उपस्थिती ही 55 होती आणि त्यातल्या 20 आणि 42 जणांनी 7 पैकी 6 तरी कमीत कमी हे अटेंड केले. म्हणजे आपण सर्टिफिकेट देण्यासाठी एक क्रायटेरिया ठेवला होता की 100% उपस्थिती असेल तरच आपण देऊ, परंतु आम्हाला कल्पना आहे की काही अडचणी असतात आणि म्हणून मग तो थोडासा शिथिल करून ज्यांनी कमीत कमी 6 अटेंड केले त्यांनाच आपण सर्टिफिकेट देऊ असं ठरवलं. पण त्यांची ही संख्या जवळजवळ 42 आहे आणि मला वाटतं ही पण खूप मोठी महत्त्वाची गोष्ट आहे की सुरुवातीला एकदम खूप लोक येणं आणि त्याची कन्सिस्टन्सी राहणं आणि शेवटपर्यंत त्या प्रमाणात लोक येत राहणं ही पण खूप महत्त्वाची गोष्ट आहे. मला असं वाटलं की ही माहिती आपल्या सगळ्यांना आणि सर्व विश्वस्तांनाही देण्याची गरज आहे. मी याच्यानंतर प्रदीपदादांना विनंती करते की त्यांनी आपले विचार मांडावेत. प्रदीपदादा खूप त्यांच्या कौटुंबिक व्यस्ततेमधून वेळ काढून आपल्यासाठी आलेत. मी आधीच त्यांचे आभार मानते.
सर्वप्रथम बोरीच्या विनंतीला मान देऊन डॉक्टर प्रदीप गोखलेंनी ही व्याख्यानं दिली त्याबद्दल आपल्या संस्थेच्या वतीने आपल्या सगळ्यांच्या वतीने मी त्यांचे आभार मानतो. इन्फोसिस फाउंडेशनमुळं आपल्याला अनेक उपक्रम हाती घेता येत आहेत आणि त्यातला हा एक नाविन्यपूर्ण असा प्रयोग होता. आणि भारताच्या प्राचीन दर्शनांबद्दल इतकं अधिकारवाणीने बोलणारा व्यक्ती आम्हाला मिळाली. म्हणजे मी जेव्हा गोखलेंचं नाव सुचवलं बहुलकरांना, म्हटलं सर गोखले येतील का? ते म्हणजे का नाही म्हणे आपण त्यांना विचारू. मला फार आनंद झाला. मी सुरुवातीला सांगतो की मी एक नास्तिक आहे, पण माझं हे नास्तिक असणं हे विशेष करून विज्ञानाच्या मांडणीतून जो मेथडॉलॉजिकल नॅचरलिझम आहे त्याच्या निष्कर्षातून उद्भवलं आहे. मला कल्पना आहे की चार्वाकपासून ह्यूमपर्यंत अनेकांच्या तत्त्वज्ञानातून, म्हणजे ज्याला आपण फिलॉसॉफिकल नॅचरलिझम म्हणू एका अर्थाने ब्रॉड स्ट्रीम म्हणून, पण जसं रिचर्ड डॉकिन्स म्हणतो की डार्विनने नास्तिक बनण्यासाठी म्हणून एक परिपूर्ण कारण पुरवलेलं आहे. ही गोष्ट मला तरी फार भावली आहे. मी स्वतः असं मानतो की ही फार महत्त्वाची गोष्ट आहे. आणि जर आम्हाला असा एखादा कोर्स डिझाईन करता आला की सगळ्या फिलॉसॉफिकल ट्रेडिशन्समधनं व्यक्त होणारी मांडणी आणि सायन्सची फिलॉसॉफी जी आहे त्यात देखील परत बायोलॉजिकल सायन्सचं फिलॉसॉफिकल फाउंडेशन्स देखील आता चांगल्या प्रकाराने प्रगत झालेले आहेत. तर त्याचं जर एक कम्पॅरेटिव्ह अशी जरी मांडणी केली तर ती समाजाला विशेष करून ह्या सगळे ज्याला आपण म्हणतो की बिग क्वेश्चन्स माणसाच्या जीवनामध्ये जे निर्माण होतात त्याला आपण उत्तर शोधायचा जो प्रयत्न आहे तर ते आपल्या संस्थेतून आपण करू शकू. जरी आपली बांधिलकी अगदी प्राच्य विद्येशीच असली तरी आधुनिकामध्ये आपण जे काही कमावलेलं आहे ते आपल्याला पाहता येईल. मी अगदी शेवटच्या टप्प्यात आलो त्यावेळेला इथे शब्द प्रामाण्यावरती प्रश्न विचारला होता. आता खरंच की अप्रत्यक्षच आहे कारण आपण कोणाचे तरी, पण त्यात एक मूलभूत फरक आहे असं मला वाटतं. प्रोफेसर जेरी कोएन म्हणून आहे, बायोलॉजीचा शिकागोला प्रोफेसर आहे. 2 वर्षापूर्वी आम्ही त्यांची आयसरमध्ये आणि भारतभर लेक्चर्स अरेंज केली होती. त्यांचं एक पुस्तक आहे फॅक्ट वर्सेस फेथ. मला असं वाटतं की आपण ज्यांना ज्यांना या विषयामध्ये रुची आहे त्यांनी जरूर वाचावं. कारण एव्हिडन्स बेस्ड फॅक्ट्स तर तो फिलॉसॉफीमधली जी काही प्रमाण आपण मानतो आणि विज्ञानाच्या आधाराने कशाला एव्हिडन्स म्हणतो तर तो जो मेथडॉलॉजिकल प्रोसेस आहे की ज्याची आपण असं म्हणू शकतो की मोस्ट क्रेडिबल असा निष्कर्ष आपण त्याच्यातनं काढू शकतो, वारंवार त्याचा प्रत्यय घेऊ शकतो. तर ही देखील एक फार मोठी भर पडलेली. शेवटी विज्ञान देखील जसं त्याच्यातनं त्याची तंत्रज्ञानात्मक बाजू फार सहजपणे आपल्या डोळ्यासमोर येते याच्या रूपाने, पण तत्वज्ञानात्मक बाजू जी आहे त्याची भर देखील एकूण माणसाचं ह्या विषयातलं जे काही संचित आहे दीर्घकाळापासून, प्राचीन काळापासून, केवळ भारतातलंच नाही जगभराचं, तर ते एकत्र आलं पाहिजे. दुर्दैवाने घडलं असं की त्याच्यामध्ये काहीतरी एक द्वैत आहे, असे सायलोज तयार केले गेलेले आहेत आणि टर्फ वॉर तयार होतो. तर तो नष्ट होऊन आम्हाला जर खऱ्या अर्थाने हे सगळं जसं 2 कल्चर्स म्हणलं होतं पण त्याच्यावरती नवीन मांडणी झाली की 3rd कल्चर, की ज्याच्यामध्ये ह्या प्रकारच्या अशा बॅरियर्स राहणार नाहीत ज्ञानाच्या आणि त्या सगळ्या तुटून जाऊन एकूण मानवाचं जे काही संचित आहे त्याची कसोटी ही निश्चित केली गेली पाहिजे. आणि तिची कसोटी ज्याच्यावरती घासल्याशिवाय, कस लावल्याशिवाय काय मानायचं याबद्दलचा एक आपल्या जगातल्या सर्व विद्वान मंडळींनी जर त्या निष्कर्षाकडे गेले तर समाजामध्ये संभ्रम निर्माण होणार नाहीत आणि तत्वज्ञानाचा व्यक्तिनिष्ठ पाया संपून जाऊन तो खऱ्या अर्थाने त्या सगळ्या संचिताचं जे काही आपण असं म्हणू की व्यक्ती जातील निघून त्यातल्या, पण त्या संचितातून प्राप्त झालेल्या आणि मान्य झालेल्या अशा एका कसोटीवरतीच आपण काय ज्ञान म्हणून स्वीकारायचं या दिशेने अधिक प्रभावीपणाने पुढे जाऊ असं मला वाटतं. पुन्हा एकदा व्याख्यात्यांचे तर धन्यवादच, पण या चांगल्या उपक्रमाला आपण सगळ्यांनी प्रतिसाद दिला त्याबद्दल आपल्याला धन्यवाद. आणि आपल्याला एक शेवटी एक गोष्ट सांगतो की जसं आपण इथं हा कोर्स चालवला तसा गरवारे कॉलेजमध्ये आपण एव्होल्युशनरी बायोलॉजीवरती ह्याच धर्तीवरती सर्टिफिकेट कोर्स आणि 10 लेक्चर्स फक्त तिथं वेगवेगळ्या लोकांची लेक्चर्स घेतली. आणि खरंच आम्हाला आनंद, इथेही आम्हाला जसं वाटलं तिथं वाटलं होतं की फार थोडे लोक येतील, पण 150 लोकांनी तिथं नाव नोंदवलं आणि सरासरी 100 उपस्थिती होती. तर हा सगळा प्रतिसाद बघता मला असं वाटायला लागले की आपणच कुठंतरी कमी पडतो. आपल्या संस्थांनीच पुढाकार घेऊन अशा प्रकारचे उपक्रम अधिकाधिक प्रमाणात जर निर्माण केले तर ही जी काही शिक्षणाची औपचारिक बॅरियर्स असतात की फक्त अमुक अमुक लोकांनी जायचं, तर खुलं वातावरण निर्माण होईल आणि नागरिक आणि ज्यांच्याकडे ते ज्ञान या सगळ्यांचा परस्परांमधले एक चांगला संवाद घडेल. धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद प्रदीप दादा. तुम्ही म्हणालात तसं खरोखरच या आपल्या कोर्समध्ये ज्या लोकांनी रजिस्टर केलं त्याच्यामध्ये आत्ता जसं दिवाणांनी सांगितलं की ते कॉर्पोरेटमध्ये आहेत, अशी मेडिकल डॉक्टर्सपासून ते IPSC UPSCसाठी तयारी करणाऱ्या लोकांपर्यंत वेगवेगळ्या रेंजच्या लोकांनी ह्याच्यामध्ये रजिस्टर केलेलं आहे. त्याच्यामुळे ती पण एक खूप महत्त्वाची गोष्ट आहे. औपचारिकपणे नाही पण मनापासून ही गोष्ट केली पाहिजे. इन्फोसिस फाउंडेशनचे मनापासून आभार. इन्फोसिस फाउंडेशनचं हे सगळं आपल्यापर्यंत पोचण्यासाठी ज्यांनी अथक मेहनत घेतली त्या प्रदीप आपटे सरांचे मनापासून आभार. भूपालदादा, प्रदीप रावत, बाहुलकर सर हे तर सतत आपल्याला मागे पाठिंबा देऊन आणि संस्थेला पुढे नेण्यासाठी झटत असतात. त्या सगळ्यांचे मनापासून आभार. इथे रविवार असूनही आपल्याला आपल्या कुठल्याही गोष्टींमध्ये कमतरता पडू नये म्हणून आपले जे प्रसाद कोंडे आणि त्यांचे सहकारी आपल्यासाठी सर्व रविवार इथे उपस्थित होते त्यांचेही मनापासून आभार. आणि आपल्या सर्वांचे आभार. पुन्हा पुन्हा भेटत राहूया. फीडबॅक फॉर्म्स तुमच्या सगळ्यांना मिळालेले आहेत, जर परत कोणी दिले नसतील तर कृपा करून ते द्या, कारण त्याच्यामुळे आम्हाला पुढचं काय करायचं आहे हे ठरवायला दिशा मिळणार आहे. आणि पुन्हा भेटूया. सर्टिफिकेट्स ज्यांची आहेत ती नंतर अनघाकडून सगळ्यांनी आपली आपली घ्यावीत. धन्यवाद.